Good day, shalom, peace, and welcome. It's Max here. I am talking about something that's very important because it only just happened a week ago. And that is, as we all know, Charlie Kirk's assassination. Why is this important? Because Charlie Kirk was one of the most influential political activists in the world. You could even say he was the most influential political activist in the world of his age, generation. I mean, you can't really compare it, And whether you love him or hate him, you have to say that he was an incredible achiever. He did things that people would only dream of. He started Turning Point USA when he was 18, and he grew it into an organization worth tens of millions, arguably over $100 million was said. And he traveled all across the United States, also all around the world. He was a polarizing figure, yes, because he had strong conservative views. And a lot of people will either love that or hate that, especially because he put himself so out there. I didn't agree with everything he said. I mean, it's normal, when someone is out there as a very assertive speaker or assertive activist or assertive communicator. You're not going to agree with everything they say, but it should be obvious that we should all condemn 100% absolutely his murder, because that is something that does not happen, should not happen in civilized Western modern democratic societies. That's something that happens in breaking societies, something that everybody should come out completely against. If they're discussing Charlie Kirk, nobody should be celebrating the murder of innocent people. That's just crazy, right? If society was to act like that, very soon we'll find ourselves collapsing. But this video is not meant to be pushing any rage bait. What I'm trying to do right here is talk about five lessons from Charlie Kirk, right? And obviously, I had some admiration for him because I think he was a very effective communicator. You can just see about how much of an influence, how much of a difference that he made. And we'll go into those five key things right now. So, firstly, as I say, I wrote a script many times over, but as I'm not the most experienced orator myself, I'm just going to be talking more heartfelt and just straight off about my thoughts and feelings about this. Number one, wisdom. Charlie Kirk was very wise in that he did his research in the politics and theology that he believed in, right? He didn't know everything about everything, but he knew about the topics that he chose to engage in, right? And you gotta respect somebody for that. He was clued in on what he was talking about, and he wasn't taking his wisdom from the traditional institutions. Traditional institutions being one, the church, and then two, the academic institutions. Right, these are generally, on the right and left. In America, the right is more church dominated, the left is very academic orientated. I'd say in Australia, it's all very academic orientated, right? That's where the granting powers and so-called wisdom comes from. But I agree with Charlie Kirk that wisdom is not necessarily at all to be found in academia, but in the real world. And that wisdom can be found by studying history, and can even be found by studying holy literature. He had the wisdom of, obviously beyond his years, starting an organization as a teenager and galvanizing the millions and millions of support. To be critical of him, I'd say that he was lacking the wisdom of knowing that whatever he was to say, every mishap, every misstep, every word which was not, spoken correctly, or every thing where he kind of might have said, not being so eloquent or clear, would be held against him and would be smeared that you were a racist, you were a fascist, you were a sexist, on and on and on. But as we know in the Western world right now, as a kind of reactionary force to the 20th century that was actually very racist and had its fascism and sexism, that this is all very reactionary to that, the wokest culture. So he was somebody obviously not afraid to stand up to the mainstream wokest ideology that dominates a lot of the Western world. And a lot of people respected him for that because he was at the forefront of that, especially for his age, his generation, the movement that he kind of began. But, if you really watch Charlie Kirk for more than just a soundbite here or there, you see that he was not racist, sexist, fascist. He talked with people of all different skin colors, sexualities, backgrounds. The fact that the closest people in his life was perhaps Candace Owens, a black woman, and Dave Rubin, a gay man, and then Ben Shapiro, a Jewish man. I mean, always friends with minorities, so that's a very unsuccessful racist or sexist man, right? It's like these claims are kind of amazing that people can come up with such claims, but what it seems like is that for the wokest movement, which is kind of a collective unconscious, but it also manifests obviously in reality, that nothing will ever be good enough for them, that no level of purity will ever be enough. And that's why it seems that on this wokest ideology, there is no Charlie Kirk, there is no thought leader, there is nobody who really kind of is right up there, because it's so crabby, like crabs in a bucket kind of thing. It's so tearing people apart for every misstep. Nobody will ever be good enough. Nobody will ever be unracist or unsexist or unprejudiced enough. It's just impossible, right? Like, with the kind of standards that's set. Because if you're for women's rights too much, then you're not supporting trans rights enough. And if you're for trans rights enough, you're not supporting these kind of religious rights, and so on and so forth. It's like, it's all the intersectionality kind of actually conflicts when you look at it, right? You can talk about this stuff for hours, but I just kind of bring it back to that, the wisdom that he knew what he was talking about. He spoke on it. He did his research, and he was also willing to change, because his whole banner, his thing was, prove me wrong. I mean, it's this very sick, perverted, like, evil kind of joke that he was proved wrong in the end. If anything, you could say that he was proved right, that he did kind of martyr himself for the cause, right? But yeah, I don't think people should be making fun of somebody for getting brutally assassinated, because think what kind of karma that does to your soul if that's how you're gonna think about reality and other human beings, right? Other human beings that didn't really wish any harm upon anybody, really. Number 2, justice. Of course, Charlie Kirk had his own ideals and ideas of justice, and they're different for everybody. It's obviously very different if you're left or right or north or south on the political spectrum. But you got to admire that he did have a strong sense of justice. He did believe in the sense of that there's good in the world and there's evil, and that he didn't want to contribute to the evil. He wanted to make the world a better place. He wanted to bring people together in discussion. And there is even a sense of justice of even just sitting down with people that you may or may not agree with, like having discussion, going through Socratic dialogue. That is some sense of justice in itself. I mean, even we give it in Western society to the worst criminals, someone who has done the most unimaginable things, we still allow them to sit down and explain themselves or plead their guilt or innocence. Like, this is a kind of a Western tradition of dialogue, of talking. So, you gotta just appreciate that. We're all human beings. If you want to be a real human being, you're not gonna agree with everybody and everything. We shouldn't always have to agree with everybody. That should be obvious, but there is a justice in being able to talk about things. That's the amazing thing about the American First Amendment that we got to appreciate. I wish it was worldwide. I wish we had the same quality of a First Amendment in Australia and Europe and the rest of the world. But got to appreciate that it exists, and that people that fight to keep that both for themselves, their allies, and their opponents. 3. Fortitude. Obviously, he was a very courageous man to get out in public and talk about what he believed in. I mean, he must have had a lot of conviction, of course, right? He was standing up for many people that also believed what he believed in, but they didn't have that kind of courage. So it's very important for people to be able to do this, because for every one person that is able to talk to others, how many others, hundreds or thousands, that are not able to? And you can even see that his rallies had so many thousands of people. So people love him. Even millions of people are mourning his loss around the world right now. But that's an amazing fortitude. And we've got to say that in the West there is this massive thing about protecting and doing everything that we can to support minority rights. And that's a beautiful ideal. But we must also think about supporting and protecting minority perspectives and minority psychologies and minority ideals, because we don't need to lynch mob people just for having a different ideal. And essentially that's what his enemies were trying to do, and eventually did do, by assassinating him. Number 4, temperance. By now you realize I'm going through the cardinal virtues that were kind of brought about by the ancient Greeks. Yeah, these are classic virtues that make great men, in the Western tradition. Charlie Kirk did have temperance. Some people say, oh, he's so provocative, he's so polarizing. Oh yeah, he was a bit provocative, a bit polarizing, but come on, if you're mature, you're allowed to have different opinions, and he was quite temperate. You can see that by all his clips. Again, he could have maybe spoken a little more eloquently or politely, here or there, but, really, you compare him to anybody, pretty much, of his socio-political stature who's out there, and he was quite eloquent, charismatic, and temperate. He did have temperance, right? So, again, that's something that got him so many fans. Number 5 is faith. Charlie Kirk was a man of deep faith. Not everybody does have faith. I think it's very important to have faith. At least we gotta have faith in ourselves. We gotta have faith that the world is a reasonable, decent place. Otherwise, you're gonna fall into some kind of nihilism. His faith was in God and Jesus Christ. And you can't really fault that. You can't fault Jesus Christ. You can fault perhaps that you don't agree with his interpretations of the Bible, of course, that you're not a Christian. You don't think that his way of having a literal interpretation of this and this and this, cool, that's understandable. It's not understandable to hate someone for having faith. In fact, that's why he probably was able to really garner so much passion from so many followers, from literally millions of followers, because he did have a worldview that resonated with a lot of people, but also a certain faith, and that faith resonated from within. The worldview was probably from without, but that faith was powerful. It is a powerful thing, of course, So that's good on you, Charlie Kirk. Rest in peace. Let me just recap on the 5 things that we can learn from Charlie Kirk's life. Wisdom to study and work out what you want to communicate with the world, whether it's in speaking or another art form or even in some kind of entrepreneurial venture. We all have like a message. We all have something we want to communicate with the world. So be wise about it. Justice. You have to have a sense of justice, you know. Can't just be just as much as you get. You know, it's got to be, how can I try to be better? How can I try to make the world better from what I believe in? Bravery. You know, if you're not brave, what are you going to get done in life? Probably not much. Temperance. Temper yourself. You know, you can't go too crazy, because those who kind of are shock jocks and try to really get in people's faces too much and like with crazy things, and you know, usually they kind of like burn out pretty quick. And number 5 is faith at cost. If you have faith in yourself, the world, and a higher ordeal like Jesus Christ, well, yeah, I mean, that's gonna take you above and beyond, right? So they're the 5 things. And yeah, let's just remember Charlie Kirk, that he tried his best. He was no means perfect. He said this many times. He said that he did not live up to the glory of God, that he did not walk as Jesus did. He said these kind of things. I'm paraphrasing, but let's remember that he tried his best. He changed the face of American sociopolitics. He inspired many people. He inspired people to enter into the socio-political discourse, right? He inspired people to care. And you can see that these days. In the 20th century, you know, people were much more engaged in art and entertainment, right? The 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. A lot of musicians and painters and filmmakers. I'm a filmmaker. I also make music. But these days, people are more interested in sociopolitics. It's kind of obvious, right? Like, it's the kind of transfer of energy as a culture. Some people might say that's the feminization, or that's the technology coming into place, so that's the result of multicultural society. It's, you know, many of these things may be true, but he was at a forefront. He could have been the next American president. That's very arguable. It's very imaginable with the kind of charisma he had. He obviously did make a big change. He could have made a much bigger change, but let's remember his legacy, that for someone who was 31 years old, did amazing stuff in his lifetime. You know, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. May you not be forgotten. And let's try and learn and become better people, thanks to some of the lessons that you left us with. So, peace. I look forward to talking to you more about more different issues.